up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions Day 3 draft picks. Day 3 is in the books. The NFL draft is now complete. And now we're on to the undrafted free agents. But the Detroit Lions had 3 picks today. And let's just say they moved around a little bit. It was entertaining, so let's get it started.
You know, I got to shout out DoseOfDion, man, because it was actually the first time I went live on YouTube. And, you know, guys don't know DoseOfDion. He put out a lot of good content for the Detroit Lions.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And I just wanted to do a quick little recap of the 3 picks the Detroit Lions made today. Kind of go through those. Thing is, the Detroit Lions drafted a lot of players that I wasn't necessarily expecting, which is a good thing because now we get to watch film on these players and it won't be players that we've already talked about. You know, we won't be repeating the same thing. Now, they did draft one player that I did predict. They got one, so I got one right. All right, I'm happy about that. I got one right. I'm happy about that. I got one right. I just wanted to get one right. Last year I got 0. This year I got 1. Not the right spot, but I got the player correctly. And this is receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. This was the first pick for the Detroit Lions in day number 3. This is the receiver out of USC, and man, I was hyped. This might be my favorite pick just because of the simple fact that I did predict him to the Lions just in the wrong spot. At 6 foot 197, to me, this is one of the more complete receivers in this class. Now, he may not have the athletic upside of some other receivers, and that makes you excited as to what they could become. But when you look at what he's done at USC since he stepped in day 1, all right, since his freshman season, you see how impactful he's been, the production he's had ever since he stepped in there. I mean, you can't question it. In his second year, played mainly at the slot position, and this guy had over 1,000 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. Last season, extremely productive, over 40 receptions, over 400 yards, 7 touchdowns. I mean, he's a threat all over the field, which I think makes St. Brown such a good piece for the Detroit Lions because you can play him all over. You can play him like a big slot. You can play him on the outside. You can play him wherever you need him. Now, the Detroit Lions had the speed guys. They have the Perrimans. They got Tyrell, who's got good top end speed. They have a lot of speed guys. That's not to say St. Brown is slow because he's not slow. He just doesn't have elite speed. You know, he doesn't have the elite boxes checked there. He's a strong receiver, though. That's a really nice route runner because he's pretty twitchy with his routes. He's very detail-oriented when he runs his routes. And at the point of attack is probably my favorite part. Tracking skills on deep passes is outstanding. And then it's just his ability when the ball is up in the air to make a play. He has a great vertical. I think it's like 39 inches, so that obviously helps him. He's strong. He can play through that contact. He has a very high contested catch percentage, way higher than the college football average. So that's where you like him most. You can put the ball up and this guy can go make plays while also avoiding contact. He just has a great way to control his body downfield, avoid hits, and still be able to come down with the football. It's outstanding. And in the red zone, he's a threat. We saw it last year with 7 touchdowns on just over 40 receptions because you can use him down there. He does lack some of the dominant height of like 6'3", 6'4", and he doesn't have the elite speed, but he's a very well-rounded receiver that just brings a lot. I don't think he's a great blocker. He also brings yak, though. I mean, after the catch, he makes you miss. In 2019, he had like 18, I think 18 broken tackles, somewhere in that range, which is just crazy. So his ability to just play everywhere, it makes this just an awesome pick for the Detroit Lions because he's going to be productive day 1. I don't know how high his ceiling is going to be because athletically and size-wise, he is limited a little bit. But when you talk about a guy that can help you this season, this is a target that I think golf is going to like. He did have some concentration drops last year, which too many receivers had, like Terrace Marshall had that as well. Some concentration drops needs to be cleaned. You know he can catch the football. He just has sometimes where he, takes his eyes off of it, and that can't happen. You got to be able to catch the football. So he's a great pass catcher, occasional focus drop. So that's obviously something he's new proven for. But when I take a look at some of the receivers that Jared Goff has in the past, those bigger receivers, big slots, things like that, and they needed somebody. Not only for now, but also for the future. Someone that can just help them. Take some pressure off of Tyrell and Rashad and things like that, and really just get a nice core piece for the future. So they only went with one receiver, but this was a really, really good one. I'm excited that St. Brown is a Detroit Lion. The next pick was scheduled to be at pick number 153 in the 5th round. The Detroit Lions never get that. No. Brad Holmes said, we're moving around. Okay, he was going to move up yesterday. We thought maybe he'd trade back. No. Instead of trading back, all he did was move up. He moved up from 153 all the way to 113 to have back-to-back draft picks. Back-to-back draft picks. And he traded away a 2022 4th-round pick. Probably have like 10 when you throw in the comp picks for next season, so still a good amount. Of course, the 153 pick for the Browns, 113, plus a 7th round this year. So we still ended up getting an extra pick. So while we traded up, we got an extra pick in this year's draft. So, I mean, hey, it worked itself out. We ended up getting 7th pick anyways. But pick number 113, the very next pick, the Detroit Lions went with a linebacker. This linebacker is Derrick Barnes out of Purdue. Now, I haven't spent tons of time watching Derrick Barnes, but I did watch him a little bit. Him and Ernest Jones, I was kind of watching together probably a couple weeks ago. This is a 6 foot, 200, just under 240 pound linebacker, so definitely good size, a little bit on the shorter side. But when you looked at how the linebackers were going in the draft, you could tell that they were flying off. And if you wanted an interior, middle linebacker, you were starting to lose a lot of those guys that had the potential to play that spot. Okay, linebackers flying off. It wasn't a very deep draft for linebackers, especially if you're looking for day one impact. So the Detroit Lions said, hey, we got to make sure we go up and get this because it was getting very thin, very, very fast. So that's what he did. He traded up and got his guy. And I love that. I like the aggressiveness. I know, sometimes you hate to see trade ups and things like that. But at the end of the day, that means they loved the guy. They went up 40 spots to go make sure they got him. I like that. That tells me that they really wanted this player. They didn't just settle. They wanted to make it happen. And he didn't hold back. I love that from my GM. There's no hesitation. I want him. I'm going to go try to get him. They had to hold him back from getting Levi. But this time he's like, I'm getting this dude. And he went up and did that. Now, to me, this is the best fit for an attacking defense, which is what I expect the Lions to do next season. Less of a two-gapping defense, more of an attacking defense downhill, getting after the quarterback with a guy like Dom Capers here. I think what we've seen so far, at least so far, from Derrick Barnes, the linebacker out of Purdue, is that that's where he's at his best. He's at his best near line of scrimmage, being a pass rusher. In 2019, he had 7.5 sacks. Now, you wonder why that dropped off so much in 2020. Well, in 2019, he was playing the edge position. He was like an edge rusher. And you look at 2020, he was more of an off-ball linebacker. So he's played both those spots, only 1 year of experience as an off-ball, but it does give him some position versatility to line up at different spots. But he is a very quick linebacker. He ran a 4.57 40, which is extremely fast for his position. And he's got a really nice short area burst. He's a very explosive athlete when you look at how he graded out. And he's a strong athlete, 29 bench press reps. He can lay the boom on some of his hits. I said, when I first watched him, he kind of reminded me a little bit of Jarrad Davis, which isn't a bad thing. Jarrad Davis was just in the wrong scheme. He reminded me a tad of Jarrad Davis, the type of guy that could fit in a 4-3 defense, an attacking defense, which is what Davis was built for. And someone said Stephen Tulloch. I think that's another interesting comparison. Of course, I'll have to dive more into film. I haven't seen tons yet. But yeah, I think those are good things. His height is lacking. His change of direction is not the best in coverage. So he's not the best in man coverage. Even though he allowed on 19 targets, 13 receptions, he seems better fit because of his short area explosiveness for a zone, coverage from the linebacker position. And that's, probably what you're going to see. But also when you look at the Lions linebackers, he's phenomenal as a run stopper. He could develop being a pass coverage guy because of his athletic traits. He's just not great there yet. At least he wasn't in college. However, you look at a guy like Alex Anzalone, he's way better in pass coverage than he is as a run defender. The Detroit Lions, and people ask why they passed on Jamal, I think a lot of it probably had to do, and yes, there could have been a shoulder injury that I heard, but also because he wasn't much of a run defender. He wasn't giving much production as a run defender. The Detroit Lions got a run defender that can play the middle linebacker position, but also when he played edge, had 7.5 sacks in the Big Ten. That's impressive. Those are good numbers. So the Detroit Lions traded up, they grabbed the linebacker. The only linebacker they took, him was Jalen Maven, and it gives you a little bit more flexibility with certain positions here. And then finally, the Detroit Lions had to wait so long to get their final pick. We were the third to last pick in the draft. This one just took forever, but it finally happened. It was pick number 257, which the Lions got from the Browns. Their 7th pick in the draft. Jefferson, running back out of Oregon State. And this running back is 6 foot 206, some relatively good size. And I haven't watched much Jefferson, so I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you things that I don't know because I don't want to throw out things there that I don't necessarily believe in a player. But I can tell you a few things. I know that he played in a heavy zone rushing scheme, which I think fits the Lions. Not as much gap, it was more zone rushing scheme. His vision is the biggest pro everybody gives him, is his awesome vision. And that's usually a big thing in a zone blocking scheme because you have to kind of pick and choose the holes. So that kind of scheme is I'm expecting the Lions to run up front. I think Sewell fits that well as well. I think it's what Anthony Lynn has done a majority of the time. And his vision is the biggest credit he gets, which I think is, to me, from what I've seen with past running backs for the Detroit Lions, is arguably the most important part. You got to have great vision, and he has that. A lot of big runs in his career. He's made a lot of guys miss, 27 to be exact. 6.5 yards per carry. Kind of reminded me a little bit that I watched other Jamal Williams in terms of he doesn't have the elite athleticism once again here. He's not extremely shifty. He doesn't break tons of tackles, but he's kind of like a downhill strong runner, where once he gets rolling, he can kind of run through you, but he's not going to run through tackles consistently. I have heard that he's a good pass catcher. You look at him statistically, he's had great pass catching stats. In his first year, 25 receptions and only 27 targets. Catches pretty much all the passes thrown his way, and I've heard he's a good blocker. So I'll have to just take their word for it. He did battle with some injuries in 2019, and like I said, he doesn't have the elite traits there. He's not a consistent, tackle breaker, but I think it is a lot of competition for a guy like Kerryon Johnson, Jamal Williams, just to keep pushing these guys and fight for a roster spot. Projected they would do it with their last pick in the 5th round. They went back to the 7th round. I think it made more sense based on the value to take someone at that spot. Okay, you look at Kerryon Johnson, the injuries he's dealt with. Not to say that he can't be better with Deuce Staley, but he has struggled since his rookie season. Deuce Staley spoke highly of him, but they know about the injuries. They know the fact that he struggled since then, and also the fact that this is the last year of his deal. You look at a guy like Derrick Swift, yes, great, you got the one running back there, Jamal Williams, only a 2-year deal for Jamal Williams. But not only that, running backs are so difficult to draft. Statistically, it's one of the hardest positions to draft. And it may seem crazy because people say, oh, you can just draft any running back. But that's not the case. So there's a good chance maybe this doesn't work out. It's statistically, for about a 10-year span, was the 2nd hardest position to draft and have a day 1 impact. But I also think that a run-heavy team needs depth here, especially if you've had injuries. Swift coming off a concussion, Kerryon dealing with tons of injuries last couple of years. You got to have depth at that position. You can't go into a year saying, yeah, we got depth, but they could get hurt. You got to have depth, and especially if you like someone, you snag them. And that's what they did here with Jefferson. And I thought that was, a nice move. And you also consider the fact that the Chargers last year had 4 running backs on the roster consistently, and all 4 of those running backs had over 200 yards rushing. So Anthony Lynn will get involved tons of different running backs. I think he just, is kind of fitting the mold of good vision, reminds me of Jamal, no elite traits, and that's why he fell, but he's a good vision running back, 6.5 yards per carry last season, can catch passes, and I've heard he's a good blocker. So, I'll have to check more on Jefferson. I'm excited to do that, but I don't think running back is a terrible pick. I mean, let's think about it like this, right? You have UDFA now. I'm going to give you guys some updates on some UDFA signings that we've already made. Yeah, that's the thing. It's going to go fast, so we're going to have to kind of update this periodically, not necessarily every time the Lions do it. Because there have been some free agents, UDFA signings already. And I know a couple of these names are going to make you guys happy. The first one for me is Jonathan Adams, the receiver out of Arkansas State. So Jonathan Adams Jr. has been signed with the Detroit Lions. When I watched Jonathan Adams, I had him ranked extremely highly because he was the type of guy that could win contest situations like nobody's business. He showed a little bit of burst, good size. He dominated at Arkansas State. Then the Detroit Lions signed, guess who? Sage Surratt. I mean, so many people wanted Sage Surratt, and they picked him up in free agency. So we talk about receiver was falling. Sage Surratt is not a very fast receiver. Not going to get ton of separation that way. But he is one of the best contested situation receivers out there. Honestly, he's one of the best in the country. So when you consider that, Detroit Lions have a lot of speedy guys. Those are the type of guys that could potentially make the rosters as mismatch problems. I mean, the Lions have the speed. They have good route runners. Now they could have the big guys to be mismatch problems. They said it's all about matchups, and that's what you're going to get with these guys. The Detroit Lions also signed Brock Wright, who is a blocking tight end out of Notre Dame. Notre Dame. Yeah, but the Detroit Lions could use some depth at tight end, that's for sure, to compete with, Josh Hill for that spot. They needed depth after they cut tight end Hunter Bryant. Then they signed center Drake Jackson out of Kentucky. Now, this is a run-heavy offense. This is the same place that we got Logan Stenberg from, and he's a backup center, so he can compete for that role behind Frank right now. If anything, all we need is really depth on the interior. We didn't need to use another top pick there. We have our Sewell at tackle, so now you just needed some depth, and Drake Jackson can do that, plus obviously some connections there with maybe some Logan Stenberg, which would be cool. I mean, it could be cool to have both those guys on the roster. Also, Tavante Beckett. This is a linebacker out of Marshall. Now, he's very small, almost built like a safety, shorter than a Wusu, but pretty much the same weight. So he's kind of like a safety, to be honest with you. He's racked up tons of tackles. He's the type of player that can kind of play in a very strange, type of maybe a 4-2-5 role, whereas that kind of linebacker safety hybrid, that seems like that would be the type of role that he would play in. A.J. Parker, this is a cornerback out of Kansas State who has played the slot cornerback position at 5'9". He's a mentioned Big 12 player, so he's going to compete for that slot position with a guy like Corn Elder, because the Lions do have Corn Elder for this year, but they don't really have a future plan there, especially after, they got Melly out of Syracuse. He's not really, a help there that much. He doesn't really help you much with the slot position. So I think when you look at A.J. Parker, he can compete for that slot role. At least, maybe be the backup and maybe be part of the future down the road. Now, look, these guys may not make the team. Some may, some may not. But regardless, the Detroit Lions signed a couple of receivers. I know Surratt was one you liked. I really like Jonathan Adams, so I love that one. And that's the thing, man. These are going to fly through. There's going to be tons of these. So we'll try to update it periodically, but it's going to go fast. And, of course, when this starts to really cool down, when UDFA starts to calm down after the draft, we'll get into, breakdowns of these guys that are still here, that are remaining. So, yeah, ultimately, the Lions finished it off, and I just love the fact they weren't afraid to bounce around. They weren't afraid to move around. If they love someone, they stuck to their plan. They didn't go by a certain position. They said, hey, throughout the draft, we want guys we love. And that doesn't matter where it is. If that means trading round picks, we're going to do it. We're not going to sit here and say, well, we love him, but we don't really want to go get him because we don't want to lose picks. If you love a guy, you go get him. And that's what it told me when they traded up for Derrick Barnes. And they kind of had to do it. You look at the linebackers that were still there. If they wanted an inside linebacker that could play that role, the best options were him, probably a guy like Cameron McGrone, which isn't bad. He just hasn't dropped at all really in coverage. I think there's more versatility here, but it was weak at linebacker. It was going off fast. So if you were going to do it, we talked about it before day 3, you probably got to do it with your first pick. So instead of that, they said, forget it, we'll just trade up because we also want to get St. Brown. So I'm glad I got one predicted right. The Detroit Lions draft this in the books. It was an awesome draft. I was excited. Your final takeaways would be the fact that Brad Holmes said he would take the best available, and that's what he did throughout the draft. They didn't worry about position. He took the best available, and if he had to move it to get him, he would do it. Who he felt was the best, and they just wanted who they thought was the best football players, while sort of following some of the needs that we thought that they would go, following that in some direction. And also the fact that they really trusted their draft board, and I think it paid off. The fact that they traded up for Derrick Barnes, not letting him go because you would have missed him, no doubt. With 40 picks between you and Derrick Barnes, there's no doubt with the linebackers going off, you would have missed him. Secondly, the way that you were able to wait on receiver, realizing that some of these top receivers were going to hit UDFA. Instead of saying, let's take one here and there with limited amount of picks, early in the draft, they went with who they thought was the best available, but as everybody else in the draft did, they got trenches, and the Lions were a part of that. They got 2 explosive rushers, potentially maybe the best pass rushing defensive lineman in this draft in Levi. Of course, we got Penei Sewell, but then they're now able in UDFA to hit on these guys that, to me, are draft talents. Like, I look at Jonathan Adams Jr., I like this guy as a draft talent. I had him of multiple players that got drafted today, or anywhere in the draft. You look at a guy, like Sage Surratt. I had him above guys that got drafted. So they were still able to land these guys while not having to spend a draft pick. And with limited picks, that's what you have to be able to do. So they trusted their draft board, and it paid off for them. So, Brad was supposed to be a draft guy, and you could tell that he had a good feel for how the board was going to fall, and I think they took really good advantage of it. Just from the eye test alone, it seemed like they did a really good job. We'll get into grades, things like that later, but I want to watch each player individually, grade them individually before I start grading the entire draft. But either way, I want to say thank you to everybody that came into the stream. The support was insane through all 3 days. Starting at Delmore, I want to say thank you to those guys for that opportunity. And then, of course, these last 2 days in here with DoseOfDion, and then, my friend over here. I mean, it was awesome. So I appreciate the support. I think we had a lot of fun with it. You guys just supported the heck out of the stream today. And I can't say thank you enough for that kind of, what you guys did. I mean, you guys were just going back and forth, and it's, thank you. I just got to say thank you. So I'm going to hear, let me know your thoughts, comments below. How do you guys feel about the draft? UDFA is up next. And I'll see you next week with some film videos. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.